And now the answers to our review questions. Yes, presentations are a good way to present new material to people.
And the answer for brainstorming is A. Brainstorming is creative.
And yes, discussion groups can help participants solve problems and explore related parts of topics.
To set up a role play, you should B. Brief the players about their roles.
And finally, in working with task groups, you need to C. Give clear directions, check for understanding, help them stay on track, give them a warning when time is nearly up, and then call time and begin the reports. Now imagine you're teaching Introduction to Disaster Services. In the class, you have the over-participating student who has a comment for every topic. He seems intent on impressing the other participants, but his comments contain incorrect information. Let's observe his behavior in this next video clip.
I know people who've been on disaster assignment, and what they told me is nothing like what you're telling me right now. Wait. I wanted to know more about this Red Cross opens the shelters. Well, you know what happened in our chapter? The emergency management people opened the shelters. And then the Red Cross people showed up with the food and cots and things like that. What do you do in those situations? I want to know more about those government agencies. That National Transportation Safety Board, what do they do in time of disaster anyway?
What interventions could you make in the classroom? Some intervention that you could make in the classroom are: respond to the person's comment by acknowledging their experience, but be sure to correct his incorrect information. State to the class, let's hear from some people who haven't participated yet. Use your body language to discourage him by turning away from him or move towards other participants and make less eye contact. If the behavior continues, speak to him at a break about letting others participate. Now that you know some of the activities of instructors, let's learn about the activities of facilitators.
Disaster services simulations are tabletop exercises in which participants work as a team to practice problem solving in a disaster setting. For example, the shelter simulation, participants work as a shelter team to open, operate, and close a shelter. The simulation is divided into 4 rounds. In each round, the teams receive situation reports with an update on the disaster and the disaster response. They are asked to use a checklist that's in the Shelter Operations Participants Workbook in order to become more familiar with the content of that resource. They also receive samples of completed forms that pertain to the situation. Participants also get Disasters Happens cards with issues and situations that commonly occur in shelters. They must decide how to handle each of these issues. As mentioned earlier, the role of the facilitator is somewhat different than the role of the instructor. Facilitators use basic instructor functions such as bridging, assigning tasks, summarizing, intervening, and climate setting. They may use some of the same methods, such as presenting and brainstorming. The difference really comes down to how the facilitator spends his or her time in the class. In the simulation, the facilitator spends very little time delivering content. Instead, he or she spends more time on task assignment, possibly more time on interventions, and a significant amount of time conducting a debrief of the session. The structure of the simulation allows the table teams to create the learning for themselves. The facilitator is primarily there to help the teams understand the roles and the structure of the simulation and to interpret the learning.
Facilitating a simulation allows an instructor to build on the basic instructor functions and methods. A simulation begins with climate setting, just as in other courses. In a simulation, this includes introducing the format of the simulation, the roles the participants may play, the resources available to assist them, and the roles the facilitators will play.
Jim is going to walk you through the instructions for organizing a shelter.
What we'll do first is set the stage for the disaster that occurred for which we're going to open up the shelter. Well, you have to have a scenario of the disaster itself, how many people are affected, and so forth. And then the first activity will be going through those initial steps of establishing and opening up the shelter. So I want to hand out some material to you that gives you the information about the shelter itself and a little bit about the scenario. Lori, could you give me a hand here? And hand one of those to everybody. You will have handouts H1 through H5, so make sure you get...
Review the task assignment with the group and allow participants time to ask questions before proceeding. Making clear task assignments is an essential function for facilitators.
Okay, has everybody read over the scenario? Yes. Okay. Go down towards the bottom of the page where it says task assignments, and we'll review these. These are the four major tasks that you'll do during this 20-minute activity episode. The first thing is to divide the key shelter responsibilities among. The fourth task is your shelter manager is going to be handed a group of cards called Disasters Happen cards. And each one of these cards has a little scenario of something that has occurred or is going to occur in your shelter. You'll have 4 of them for this activity episode. What I want you to do is, after the shelter manager reads these, is together as a group solve the problem that is read off to them. Okay? Let me hand those cards to your 2 shelter managers. Over here was Al. Goes to Al. And to Joe there. Okay? Any questions about this first activity episode? Okay. We'll take 20 minutes, so at 5 minutes to the hour, we'll get back together and report back, okay? Go ahead.
Each simulation is divided into rounds. In a round, participants usually receive an update of the situation and a list of tasks that must be completed.
We still have a major issue to deal with. You know, there were 250 people evicted out of their homes because of this fire. We only have 100 cots, so we need somebody to handle that. Isn't that your department?
Yes, actually it is. Tell you what we can do. I see on the map here there's a local church right around the corner. We can check with them. Does anyone else have any suggestions?
Well, I think, you know, that if we go to some of the nearby chapters, they probably have some cots, too.
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful.
I think the Boy Scouts might even have cots.
Right.
How about military installations?
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hotels?
Hospitals?
While the participants are working during a round, the facilitator's primary role is to observe, listen, and answer questions. At the end of each round, the teams will report their conclusions for the task assignments.
All right, I need y'all to wrap up what you're doing, and now that you've had a chance to really work through your first exercise, and it seems like everybody survived, if you'll go ahead and let's let this group go first and talk about what you did to set up the shelter.
Well, we decided to set our registration desk up at the entrance to the school. We decided to put the shelter manager's office on the stage in the multi-purpose room because it's centrally located and easily accessible. And we also decided to put the sleeping areas in the gym because they're adjacent to the, or it is adjacent to the locker rooms and showers.
Okay. One thing to think about, and those are good answers, also keep in mind that you need a space for the staff to go to take a break.
At the very end of the simulation, the class should debrief together. The facilitators will use questions from the instructor's manual to focus the learning on specific issues or processes. The debrief is critical to synthesizing the learning. It allows time for the participants to reflect on what they have learned and relate it to other knowledge and experiences. If the course is running too long, never cut the debrief short. Find other ways to make up the time.
Now that we've walked through the different phases of a shelter operation, we want to take some time as a whole group to talk about how things went. And what I want you to do, and I want all of you to feel like you can participate and throw out any answers, but think about some of the things that your team did very well, because I know there were a lot of things that you did. And in particular, did you notice any of the characteristics of effective teams that you identified earlier?
I think for this team, we all participated in the process. That helped us out a lot.
I think we stayed focused on the task at hand.
I enjoy teaching simulations because many times people learn better by doing, and a simulation gives them a chance to actually practice the skills they'll be using later.
The simulation provides some realism and a realistic setting in which they can learn some of the skills they'll need to do and use on a disaster operation.
Simulations are an exciting way to create learning in the classroom. In a simulation, the facilitator interacts with the participants in a less directive way, giving the students time and flexibility to practice resolving issues. Participants enjoy the opportunity to apply knowledge and practice making decisions in the disaster setting. Please take some time now to read more about simulations on pages 39 through 41 of the workbook. Complete the review questions on page 42.